So since we've been talking about economics and the economic growth, industrial growth, and everything that we're experiencing here in the Gilded Age, it's really important to take a look at who's demanding all of that growth, our consumers. So we've already talked about the demand on the business side, so it's time to talk about sort of the average everyday person and what's driving demand from our consumers. So going into this, it's important to remember that we're calling this the Gilded Age, right? The Gilded Age, we've said before, is referring to the fact that everything looks wonderful and glamorous on the outside, but on the inside, it's empty and non-fulfilling. So we're seeing a lot of things that people are buying a lot of things that they don't need. I'm sure you can relate to that. I do that all the time. And that is called conspicuous consumerism. Conspicuous consumerism. That is when people want and buy all of the new products on the market. Not necessarily because they need it, but because they're just trying. It's more of a what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's more of a sort of is like a standard of living that everyone's trying to achieve. It's more it sort of says something about you that you can buy all of these things, and everyone can participate in that except for the sort of very poorest people who require every dollar that they have to survive. They don't have any money at all to spare, so people are buying things that look nice and seem fancy, not because they need them, but just because they want to look nice and seem fancy. So advertising will always play a major role into convincing people what they need and what they don't need. Marketing is crucial to any business. So we start to see a lot of advertisements targeted towards the consumer, the average consumer, a lot more during this during the Gilded Age, and the amount of advertisements are really going to increase. So this all we can really tie back to one guy here in the beginning, and it is Roland H. Macy. And in 1858, he opened something brand new called a department store. And he opens this department store in New York City, and it was the largest store in America. And obviously it was called Macy's, and it is still there. And I'm sure everyone has been to a Macy's at one point or another, but I definitely recommend hitting the original Macy's. It's beautiful in Herald Square in New York, especially at Christmas. It's just very cool. So the whole idea of a department store is you're selling pretty much everything under the sun, sort of like Walmart, but we weren't at the level of Walmart yet. But it's obviously a much higher quality than what's happening at Walmart. So high quality items at fair prices is sort of how Macy's is advertised, and products are sold by department. So that's why it's called a department store. You got the, shoes, men's clothing, women's clothing, cosmetics, luggage, home goods, everything you can think of. So by the 1870s, so within 10 to 15 years, most big cities had a department store. If not Macy's, they had some branch of one of his competitors. One of his competitors is Wanamaker's, a guy named Jordan Wanamaker, who opened his department store in Philly. He offered a money-back guarantee, and he's one of the first people to ever do that. He uses big ads in newspapers pushing this money-back guarantee, and the whole idea of a money-back guarantee is a very smart marketing move, because people think, if they're willing to give me my money back in this product, number one, what's the harm in trying it? But number two, they wouldn't be willing to do that if they thought I was definitely going to bring it back. So it must be something good, something that I'm going to want, and something that I'm going to use. Now, later on in Jordan Wanamaker's life, he's going to be the U.S. Postmaster General, so in charge of the post office in the United States. And he would use his position as Postmaster General to lower shipping rates in the United States. And he does that to help encourage business, and that's a logical move. But he also offers free delivery to rural areas, which is really important. So now even people who live in poor rural communities, people who are farmers, whose entire world revolves around agriculture, who live out in the middle of nowhere, they can still have access to all of the same things that people who live in the city do, because we can deliver them all of their goods that they might want for free. Well, how do they know what's in the store? Well, Jordan Wanamaker also establishes the mail order catalog business. We'll start to see our first catalogs where you can either call and place your order over the phone, or you can fill out your order sheet out of the catalog and mail it in, and then they will deliver you your products. And if you live in a rural area, they'll deliver it for free. So lots of companies are going to start using trademark logos like the Macy's star, like you can see in that picture. That's still their logo today. And a lot of people are going to start buying by brand. They'll have brands that they trust, that they want to use over and over, so people will be loyal to their brands. And what's important about this is you can buy the same products no matter where you lived, because all of these companies are slowly but surely going to become national. But on top of that, mail order catalogs. You can always, if you want something that's only available in New York, it doesn't matter where you live, you can still order it from New York and you can have it sent to you. So here are some advertisements from this time. We've got our Jello advertisement, the Dr. Special Rum, which is basically just a drink that they were sort of marketing to try to seem like it was going to give you all of these wonderful health benefits, but it wasn't really. Here's an old Coke advertisement. So you can see their Coca-Cola logo. The font of their name is still pretty similar to what it looks like today. So, like I mentioned before, our standard of living is going to be much higher in the United States. That's still true today. The standard of living in the United States is much higher than most places around the world. And that really starts back then. And this relates back to purchasing power. If you had the power to purchase things, you had a higher standard of living. People are modernizing everything. They're modernizing their clothes and their homes. Most goods are going to become cheaper because of mass production and high demand and industrialization. So the better our economy is doing, the cheaper a lot of goods become, which helps everyone else on the economic spectrum to be able to participate in purchasing those goods, which continues to fuel demand and mass production. The middle class is really going to be established and strengthened during this time, and they are always trying to imitate the lifestyle of the upper class. I'm sure you can imagine that now. Everybody wants, the newest thing that Kylie Jenner has on her Snapchat or something. It's very similar. The middle class is sort of trying to appear part of the upper class. And lots of women are going to actually go to work, not because they need that money to live, but because they want to work to keep up with their standard of living. They want to work to make more money to live a more comfortable lifestyle. When women went to work, it was out of necessity. Now women are being given the opportunity to go to work because they want to, and because they sort of want to achieve as much as a man can achieve, which is awesome. So advertisements make it so that people are all wanting the same things. When you advertise for a product nationally, there's a demand for it on a national basis, leading to the establishment of a popular culture. Pop culture is mass culture, the culture that is most popular, the culture of the masses. So all of that is sort of demonstrated in the ways that we I guess you could say the most blatant examples of culture, which is usually the press and the arts. So in between 1870 and 1900, newspaper circulation grew 700%, which is astronomical. I'm sure that every newspaper in the world would love to grow their circulation by 700% today, considering newspapers are on the decline. But we've got two major names in the press at this point, names that you may have even heard of before. The first is Joseph Pulitzer. If you've heard of the Pulitzer Prize, the prize for reporters in journalism, even photographic journalists, that's the sort of beacon of all awards that you can get is the Pulitzer. So Joseph Pulitzer was an immigrant from Hungary, and he actually fought in the Civil War here in the United States. So he moved to New York, and he started a newspaper called The World, and it became so popular. You see a picture of a copy of The World right there. He started an afternoon newspaper also called The Evening World. So he was putting out 2 newspapers a day. This allows this allows businesses to advertise, or he's sort of the first person to allow businesses to advertise in his newspaper, which helps to keep the cost of his newspaper low because he's making even more money off of it. And when you keep the cost of your newspaper low, more people can buy it, which increases circulation. More people are reading the stories that you've put in your newspaper, enticing more businesses to advertise in your newspaper. So sort of a never-ending cycle here, a snowball effect. So he believed that the job of a newspaper was, yes, to inform, but also to stir up a little bit of trouble. He didn't think that, that the press should simply just be a retelling of facts. He thought that the press should be asking questions and pushing people to want to know the truth and want to know more. So he publishes a lot of sensational stories about crime, politics, sports, all sorts of stuff. And that's really he's gonna set that trend, and that's gonna become sort of the go-to move for basically every newspaper across the country for the next, well, really forever, because that still happens today. William Randolph Hearst, you see here on the far left, he had his own newspaper called the Morning Journal. So we should associate Joseph Pulitzer with the World, the Evening World, William Randolph Hearst with the Morning Journal. And he used a lot of the same tactics as Joseph Pulitzer in terms of selling advertising space to businesses and publishing sort of salacious stories. And soon he became Pulitzer's sort of number one competitor. So even you can see this newspaper that I've got on the slide here. It says, "Woman jumps from Brooklyn Bridge, survives mad leap." Now she's tried to kill herself. They've got this dramatic illustration of her jumping from the Brooklyn Bridge. I'm sure there are other things that happen in the world that would probably be more worthy of front page, but that's interesting, right? That it's interesting that this woman tried to jump from the Brooklyn Bridge to kill herself, but she survived. I want to read that article. I'm going to want to buy this newspaper more than just seeing, some random drama that's happening overseas, even though that might, in the grand scheme of things, be more important. This is more interesting. So different publications target different audiences, like immigrants or African Americans. So we're going to see newspapers being founded and published targeting one specific group of people. The Philadelphia Tribune was published, and it targeted the Black community, so it published articles that were more geared towards and wanted to be read by African Americans. New York City, for example, had six Italian newspapers, six newspapers that were published in Italian because they had such a large Italian immigrant population in New York City. So we're targeting all these different groups of people. The arts, like I said, are another example of how all of this pop culture is playing out. Like many authors, like Mark Twain, you see his book here that I mentioned earlier, The Gilded Age, that he writes about this era of time. He's very critical of it. That's why we call it the Gilded Age, right? He basically is the one who makes the point that everything looks so wonderful on the outside, but on the inside, it's just empty and sad. And he's not the only one to be critical of this time. Lots of authors do. One of which is Stephen Crane. I've got his book here on the far left. He writes a book called Maggie, a Girl of the Streets. Basically the purpose of that book was to expose the slums of New York City and the bad living conditions there. He also wrote a book called The Red Badge of Courage that was made into several different movies. I think the last one had John Wayne in it, the last time they made a Red Badge of Courage movie. But it's about the Civil War, and it's really about PTSD, but we didn't know what PTSD was back then, so it's more just sort of broadly defining the psychological effects of war, like what happens to someone when they're involved in combat and war and things like that. But we know that today to be PTSD. Horatio Alger Jr., remember the guy that wrote Ragged Dick, the Rags to Riches stories? He falls into this category. Thomas Eakins, we've got his painting here on the top right. He painted huge illustrations of medical operations. It's sort of like drama, right? And it's just sort of like eye-catching and crazy. You don't see things like this. You can't turn on TV and watch some operation happening on Grey's Anatomy. So this is obviously a big deal. Robert Henry, Henry with an I, he painted brightly colored urban scenes, and this is going to be known as the Ash Can School movement. Like you see the picture of this boy with his bright red scarf and his rosy red cheeks. He painted lots of things like that. You can Google more pictures that are of the Ash Can School movement.